Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Jung and von Franz, two theorists of the esoteric variety in psychology. And I've found some great use in the Poor Eternus book by von Franz. Don't know if that's how you say it, but there's a lot of good ideas in there for people who tend to lead a provisional life. And I can't say that I understood the stuff on like the mother complex because my parents were distant from me. So I didn't have an overbearing mother. So apparently there's some way that Don Juanism expresses itself when you have neglectful parents or kind of uninvolved or distant parents. So, but there's a great deal there that's super useful for understanding things I avoid, some of my inability to access feeling tones, immature reactions, bottling behaviors, and then explosive outbursts, that kind of thing. And tending to lead a life of imagination rather than changing in action. I thought it was super useful to understand comprehending something fully intellectually, but like not doing anything about it for a long time. And certainly work as a cure. You know, ever since I started doing low voltage work, I've definitely felt more coherent and more put together. So yeah, I'd say there were a million things about that were insightful, but it was still baggage. And I think Jung especially is baggage because of the religious involvement. He seems to assert that you have to remain in a Western worldview if you're a Westerner, but he might have thought that was true decades ago, but what about now? You know, I think Christianity is a failed framework. It was misinterpreted. It's, you know, Jesus was a mystic and you should interpret Christianity allegorically, but no one seems to do that. Everyone's like a literalist. You know, especially the Catholics. At least some of the new variants, you can take Jesus in as in like an icon, you know, something that you attune to, and you can you can use that as like a sublime object to like change yourself psychologically with, right? But there are some folks that think there's literal sin and a literal resurrection for that sin rather than seeing the crucifixion as an allegory for something about human development. But those are the kinds of things that Jung got right, was like understanding all these stories as allegories for human development and individuation. So there's so much there that's so cool. Like if you start analyzing your dreams, you think about your shadow material that you just put away and then project onto others. You know, you think about the things you hate and why you hate them because you've repressed them. And I think especially the idea of compensations, where if you don't healthily deal with something, it comes out anyways, but in a super perverse form. That's like just an incredible idea. And you can watch that happen in your life. Basically, if you don't change or grow, you'll grow in terms of a neurosis and it'll just eat you up. So, something that I think is part of that Christian milieu in Jung and von Franz is the idea that you, like, life is a tragedy and you should be deeply involved with it, and there's very much things you must do psychologically in order to develop. You know, you are in a developmental stage basically of your individuation. And I think that can actually hamper you from growing and changing the way you want to, because anytime you put a must on yourself or believe because of this psychological theory that you are a certain way, that's a constraint. So I've always felt it's good to keep Jung at a distance because, well, like I said, baggage. I think maybe Jungian theory just says too much and involves you too much with ideas about what must be the case in your psychology, when you could use a more transparent interpretation or a more transparent system, you know, maybe something more humanist to just kind of like be yourself. And I mean, I think the consummation of good psychology is probably to take what you think and believe absolutely seriously. I think I still want to check out Sartre because there's definitely like a psychoanalytic practice there that's very interesting, and it goes along with Gestalt theory. That's always been sort of fruitful for me, is kind of a full-on interrogation of what's really right here transparently, you know, with no machinations, no trying to do something religiously or in an Eastern sense, no hope for enlightenment or like a Satori thing. No, just like what is really right here, as real to your experience as you can get, and that transparency I think is important. So, but I want to talk quick about another failed Christian theorist, not failed, but just one that has baggage, and that's Kierkegaard. The patterns of anxiety that Kierkegaard has, the things that he worries about, like the spheres of existence and trying to choose what to do based on whether, it is aesthetically or ethically worth doing, that kind of obsession with what worldview you're going to embody comes from anxious, like low mental health patterns. And I know that from experience. And he is especially fixated on Christianity in a super subservient and like pedestrian way, a literalist way. And you just can't give Christianity that kind of value because, well, it's just really poor thinking. I mean, like, I don't know. Yahweh is just like the most ridiculous character if you're taking him literally, and the atonement doesn't make sense, and the concept of sin doesn't make sense, particularly sexual sins, because like, look at the horses, they're just going wild, but like human sexuality is sacred. Like, I don't know, it's everywhere in the animal kingdom, so there's nothing, there's no sanctifying that for humans. But there's just a number of ways that like pedantic idiot Christianity is just, Kierkegaard really dates himself by being so slavish with that. There's no reason you can't widen that out, and someone does widen it out, and that's Heidegger. And I think Heidegger is a really valuable thinker. So that secularization is really important to me, and I'm a big fan of the existentialists and phenomenologists, just because there's an interesting epistemological territory to work on there, but also ethical. Like, how do you want to live? Like, Heideggerian authenticity pretty much makes sense to me, and like the idea of the one, that's an incredible idea, and there's just a lot there that touched things that I have thought about in the world. And it turns out, as you start to grasp Heidegger, maybe you read like a translation that makes sense. Heidegger's not that complicated. It's just you need to be shown it once and map it to your experience. And like, oh, it's just that. It's nothing super crazy, but it's certainly packaged up in a difficult way. So, just wanted to talk about that little journey for me, was the journey from sort of being stuck in feeling the need, or being told I needed to stay in a Western worldview, and finding more transparent ways to think about my life through Sartre and Heidegger. So from Jung and Kierkegaard onto the secularists, that was a pretty important journey for me.